Hey guys, this is going to be a quick one. I'm not going to cover a lot here, but you need to know this so that you can do the other stuff today. Last time we talked about status, or 2 times ago, we talked about statuses. So it's a position that within society that you have. So it could be a status, could be man or woman, it could be athlete, student, all those things are statuses. And then there are certain roles associated with that status. So if you take teacher again for an example, that's the status. Roles would be grading, lecturing, meeting with the principal, meeting with other teachers. Those would all be roles associated with that status. Now, sometimes you have role conflict, and that's where when you're trying to perform roles for one status, it clashes with role performance for another status. If you use the example that I have in parentheses, so you're a student, but you also have a job outside of school and you play a sport. So there's going to be times where you have to get something ready for class, you have to study. At the same time, you have to practice for your sport, and then simultaneously, you got to work some shifts at your job. That would be role conflict because you've got three different statuses in this example: student, employee, athlete. Three different statuses, and the roles associated with each of those statuses are clashing. So it's a struggle to perform those different roles. Role strain is different. That's where you just have one status. So using the example in parentheses there, let's say I'm going to have an observation. So Mr. Zenner is going to be in to observe a lesson. So I have to spend a lot of time making sure that that lesson is ready. At the same time, I've got a whole pile of tests that I have to grade. And let's say there's a meeting with a student in the morning before school. So I have all these different roles, and it's taking up a lot of my time, but it's still involving only one status, my status as a teacher. That's role strain. So when you see these examples on the quizzes or on the unit test, first thing to ask yourself in the hypothetical situation: is one status involved or are multiple statuses involved in this situation? If it's multiple statuses, you're talking about role conflict. If it's just one status and there's a struggle in role performance, it has to be role strain. Okay, so roles, remember, what makes a role different than a status? Status is the position in society, student, daughter, those type of things. Roles are associated with each status. So we have expectations that a teacher is going to grade papers, that a teacher is going to create lessons for class. So role performance is what we expect from a given status. And there's confusion when we don't get that, when people don't fulfill their roles that are associated with the status. Okay, I'm not going to show that one from an old Saturday Night Live. Maybe later on we can watch that. But think about what happens like at work if you have a job. If one of your coworkers or some of your coworkers aren't, let's say it's a fast food job, and they aren't, getting the prep work done to get the food ready. In other words, they're not performing their role that you expect out of them as an employee. That leads to confusion, that leads to frustration, that leads to conflict. So our society depends on people fulfilling the roles that are associated with their different statuses. It'd be like if a police officer stopped arresting people. You'd have some problems in society if that started happening and police officers stopped performing that role that we associate with police officer. Okay, rights and obligations. Rights are the things that you expect others to provide for you. Obligations are the behaviors that others expect you to perform with whatever status it is. I think we had an example of like in a restaurant, so the wait staff, the servers, The servers have a right to be paid. So in other words, they have an expectation that their employer is going to pay them for working. But they also have obligations. So the servers are obligated to provide polite service to customers. So think of rights as something that's incoming that you expect others to provide for you. Think of obligations as things outgoing from you that you are expected to do. The examples that you see in parentheses would be using students as an example. So as students, you have a right to expect that you're going to be educated at school, that you'll be fed, that you'll have a safe classroom, but then you also have obligations to listen to the teacher, to other students, show up on time, do your assignments, and so forth. And when that doesn't happen, again, just like with role performance, we get disorder. In school, if students are not listening, school doesn't function correctly. By the same token, if you look at rights up here, if your school isn't really putting in the effort to educate you, that also creates disorder in society. Okay, and we just discussed some roles that you have as a student. Okay. Last thing. So let's define role performance. So that's the actual behavior that you do to carry out your roles. Role performance can be done alone. Use the example of doing homework. So that would be a role that you have as a student under the status of student. That can be something that you can be done alone. There doesn't need to be any interaction with others. Social interaction, however, you do have to be relating to other people. So any of the ways that you influence someone else as you interact with them, this cannot be done alone. And one of the comparisons sociologists make is to a play. So our statuses provide a cue for how we expect people to behave. So like let's take the status of a mother. We expect a mother to love her children. We expect a mother to make sure that her kids are fed. We expect a mother to play with her children and so forth. Those are all roles associated with mother. So when that doesn't happen again, that leads to confusion. So it becomes a thing that we expect. So we depend on the fact that people will carry out their roles. And it's sort of like in a play where there are lines and you know, okay, so then when this character says this, I say this. So there's an expectation based upon those cues of how people will behave and relate to each other. That's social interaction. And again, it has to be done with other people. If it's not done with other people, then you're just talking about role performance. And you're going to have some examples of that next time. We'll practice on this a little bit to identify role performance versus social interaction. So the last things you need to do today, you need to do the formative that's on Canvas, and then read the article on fatherhood and marriage. The author has some strong opinions on that. You may agree, you may disagree. There's certainly a lot of areas where you can take some issue with what he's writing. But that also, there's a question or two that deals with role conflict and role strain about that article. So finish that up so that next time we can talk about that article a little bit more. Okay, I will see you on Wednesday.